Welcome to another episode of the Spoon Mob Podcast. This week I'm joined by Chef Chris Kajioka. He's the co-owner and founder of Miro Kaimuki in Honolulu, Hawaii. He also owns Papa Kurt's, which is a burger joint in Honolulu, and Waikoko, which is a restaurant inside the Westin Hotel over on Maui, different island there in the Hawaiian chains. Chris is a very famous chef in Honolulu. I mean, he worked for some of the best chefs in America that anybody has ever heard of. He kind of had a hit list of people he wanted to work for and just started checking off those boxes once he graduated culinary school. So we get into all that, why he chose that career path and how he first got started cooking. Chris is kind of the next generation of great Hawaiian chefs. The first generation is kind of Roy Yamaguchi, Alan Wong, those guys kind of late 90s, early 2000s. And Chris is kind of part of this next generation that's going to mentor the next generation after that, the third generation of great Honolulu chefs. So it's like Chris and like Sheldon Simeon, who's been on Top Chef and has an Eater series and stuff like that. He's in that generation. So we talk a lot about just what it means to be Hawaiian, be a Hawaiian chef, working in Hawaii, sourcing ingredients in Hawaii, how he founded Senia with Chef Anthony Rush, and eventually he had a bunch of other projects, and Anthony Rush had a bunch of other projects too. So they kind of separated, and he went with Miro Kaimuki and opened that with his really good friend Morad Lalu, who runs a couple different restaurants in San Francisco. He's an amazing chef, self-taught, Michelin-starred chef, never worked for anybody, is from Morocco, has a self-titled restaurant, Morad, which I've had the pleasure of eating at, which was amazing. Also has Aziz and a couple other spots too as well that he's kind of partnered up with and done some stuff with Chris. And Anthony Rush is running Senia and Bar Podmore, I think is the other restaurant that they just opened, and doing their own thing there too. So it was kind of a natural break for both of them. So we kind of cover that too as well, but a lot of Chris's formative years and how he kind of became a chef and his culinary journey and where he sees himself kind of headed and what's next and all that stuff too. So it was just a fantastic episode. It was awesome to be able to talk to Chris. We had a fantastic experience at Miro. I can't recommend it enough. The menu was just phenomenal. They do a lot of special event dinners too as well. They had the team from Maison there a few months ago. So we had Chef Marcin Kroll on this podcast too as well. So if you didn't listen to that episode, go ahead and check back in the feed. That's kind of, I think, like 53 or something like that numbered in the feed. But you can follow Chris on Instagram at Chef Chris Kajioka. And Kajioka is spelled Kajioka. You can also follow the restaurants at Miro Kaimuki, and that's at MiroKaimuki. Also at Papa Kurt's and at waikoko.maui on Instagram too as well. You can follow us on Instagram at Spoon Mob. Also follow us on Twitter at SpoonMob1. Facebook is at SpoonMob1 as well. Check out the website, spoonmob.com, for more information. All the guests that we've had on the podcast, different food photos too as well, are up under each individual profile. Make sure to follow, subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcast from. We're on all the major platforms. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel. We put the podcast up there too as well, in case YouTube is your preferred player. Those all come out 1 week in arrears. So everything gets released new on all the podcast apps, and then the following week it comes out on YouTube. But without further delay, here is my conversation with Chef Chris Kajioka, the executive chef and co-owner of Miro Kaimuki in Honolulu, Hawaii. Thanks again for agreeing to come on the podcast and do this. I know you're a busy guy. You got a few different restaurants. You're involved with a few different projects. I think you got more stuff that you're kind of working on too as well. So I want to get into all that. Miro Kaimuki, which we had the pleasure to eating at almost about a year ago. It was May. Came out to Honolulu, ate at a bunch of places, just like a COVID trip to just kind of break it all up. Had a fantastic experience. Food was delicious. We missed out on the sourdough bread just because they were sold out. Escargot, like all that stuff was amazing. So kind of start at the beginning of your career. You're from Honolulu, kind of born and raised, but I know like you're fourth generation Japanese. How did you kind of first get started cooking?
I didn't grow up in a household where, my parents are chefs or, my parents are great cooks, but they're very simple cooks, So, I grew up eating meatloaf and very basic kind of Americana dishes. My parents also always took us out for like a nice dinner, me and my brother. Ever since we were kids, we went to restaurants where they did like a tableside souffle, the Grand Marnier souffle, where there's like, tableside Caesar salad, which are things that, I've always enjoyed. I've always remembered. So, I wanted to be a chef since I was like 4 years old, so every Christmas I would ask for, chef gadgets I have pictures of me from a little kid, with chef hats. And it's just something I've always wanted to do for some reason, instead of like the cartoons, I watch cooking shows, obviously, growing up. So it's something that I've always really wanted to do, always passionate about it. So I think I was 14 or 15. When I was in high school, I started volunteering at restaurants, for free. And I did it, on my off time when I wasn't playing sports or after school. We'll just go into restaurants and volunteer. That kind of solidified my love, kind of my wanting to go into this industry. My parents were, I think they doubt you when you say you wanted to, when you're that age, right? So, my dad basically told me, he said, well, you work for free then, you prove to me that this is what you want to do. And I did that for all through pretty much high school. I was, serious enough to want to go to culinary school. I applied to CIA. Roy Yamaguchi, is a mentor of mine, and I believe he's still on the board there, but he's a big advocate for the CIA, and everyone told me that that's the best place to go. So I applied there, got in, and right after high school, that's where I went, and that kind of started it for me. Even though I already had some kitchen experience under some great places and great people.
It wasn't like one of the first places you worked at, your uncle was the chef's dentist or something like that?
Yeah, so Jean-Marie Jocelyn was, he still runs a restaurant in Kauai. He's a great, great chef. Pretty old school French. I was probably 15 or 14 when I was in his kitchen, and I was just hooked. To get into a kitchen when you're at that age, back then, it wasn't glamorous to be a chef back then. This is pretty much before the Food Network, where it really caught on. So like to ask somebody for a teenager to come into your kitchen for free, it was kind of weird, at that point. Now it's like so common, right? To stage and whatever. So yeah, I had to ask my uncle who, it's like, oh, I'm his dentist. So, it's kind of how I got my first way in. From then on, it's just, I would go to, I volunteered at another great place called High Steakhouse, which I still love today. I would go there as a kid, my parents would take us. So I literally just asked the general manager, I was like, we've been coming here since I was a kid. Can I hang out in the kitchen? So, to this day, the GM is still there. Obviously, I go there as a diner now. It's been something that, I've never wavered from. I've always wanted to be a chef. I love the craft of it. So, it just started from when I was young, and to this day, I still love it. It's a love-hate now, right? Because once you become an owner, it's different than just being a creative chef, So
obviously, Roy kind of tells you, hey, go to the CIA, the network that they have and everything. It's probably the most famous culinary school we have. Was part of the allure to being able to go to New York, where you're so far away from Hawaii, like you've never experienced kind of anything else. Like you probably, up to that point, probably experienced like California and the Pacific Coast, but like going to the opposite end of the country.
100%. It's like I was always taught that from a young age that, if once you're comfortable, you start getting lazy, you start getting complacent. And if I went to, at that time, CIA had a campus in Napa, but they didn't have the full program. If I would have gone to Napa, I would have been very comfortable, because I've been to California many times, been to Napa, been to San Francisco. But, Hyde Park, New York, it's not exactly New York City. It's 2 hours north. It's in a very small college town. The weather is as brutal as it can get, and I wanted to go to some place where I didn't know anybody. Nobody knew me. So I didn't have that, that comfort system, where I could fall back. So, literally for the first 6 months, I was so homesick. I got there, I got to Hyde Park October 1st, which was like weeks after 9/11. It was a crazy, crazy time. My mom kind of begged me not to go, because just the uncertainty of what was happening in the world. But, I was just saying, no, I gotta go. So I've always been very independent, but I wanted to prove to people this wasn't a mistake. I wanted to prove to people that, I can handle myself, being basically for the farthest state away, you always have kind of a chip on your shoulder when you're young, you're young and dumb, but I think I was dumb enough to fool myself into thinking that I can handle this, and I did. And I got, you meet friends and you meet a good support system there. It was probably one of the best times of my life just because, you have access to New York City. The great thing is that Hyde Park, Poughkeepsie is like the last stop on the train. So you could go into the city and come back on the last train, fall asleep, and then, the train driver would wake you up, and it was perfect, so many nights, coming back on the train and falling asleep. It's just good memories, and I think it was also good not going to school in New York City because I probably would have dropped out and just started working in restaurants, In Poughkeepsie, there's not much, we used to go to Walmart, we used to go to Cracker Barrel, a lot of house parties, there's not that much. It's a college town, so it was fun though. It was great times.
I ask this to every chef that comes on the podcast. If someone in your kitchen today, somebody that's working there for free or just started working there, staging or whatever, it's like, hey, I'm super serious about being a chef, want to open a restaurant of my own one day. Should I go to culinary school? What would you tell them?
That's a tough one. I think, if someone is very serious, I got a great base at culinary school, right? I got a great, just like waking up every day, going to class on time. That's discipline, right? Make sure your uniform is clean. There's certain things that I feel give you a really good foundation. Could you learn those things in working in a great restaurant? Absolutely, you could as well. I was very fortunate. My parents paid my college, but a lot of my classmates, have huge debt right after going to school. So it really depends what your situation is. I think if you are able to, yes, I do think you should go. Just for a base. I ended up doing the bachelor's there because that was kind of a trade-off for my parents. Go to culinary school, okay, but you got to get your bachelor's. So I did that. But I went to a really good high school and probably graduated close to the bottom of my class. But I wasn't book smart, but I had life experiences, and I think me being there, I grew up a lot. I matured a lot. I saw a lot. I experienced a lot, much more than a lot of kids at 18 going that far away from home, So I think it's a loaded question. I would say, I have a son, 8-year-old son, and I wouldn't necessarily tell him to go to culinary school. I would tell him just work in the best restaurant, bust your ass. Nowadays, the road that people take, they want it to happen much faster now. Before, I was executive chef the first time when I was about 28. And I felt like I wasn't ready, and that's after working for, a good 10 years in great places, and I still felt like I wasn't ready. I can't even imagine, working for 2 to 5 years and being ready. Right now, like I still make mistakes as a business owner, but, I would say, whatever circumstance you're in, I think culinary school is a good thing. But if you're really stretched financially, then just start working.
After culinary school, you made a list, I think, of 5 chefs you wanted to work for. Who was on that list? I know of a few, but I don't know the full 5.
Well, during CIA and our bachelor's, we have this big thing. It's a wine trip, basically. It's we go to San Francisco, we go to Napa. Actually, during my externship, I did it back at Roy's. We had done a dinner with Ron Siegel, who was at Massa's at that point. Iconic San Francisco restaurant. I was his helper during that dinner. I was just completely blown away. And then, you see the original Iron Chef. He was like the original guy to do it, to beat Sakai. So you see that and you're like, okay, and then during that trip, I ate at Massa's. And at that point, that was by far the best meal of my life. So Ron was someone who I was like, I have to work for Ron. Ron comes from Thomas Keller. Thomas was on the list. Pierre Garnier was on the list, which I actually got to spend the week with him in Berlin. Most of my list was French people, just because that was my interest. Ron Siegel, I texted with him a few days ago, but I would say, to this day, he, has more influence on me than any other chef. When I worked with him, it was at the dining room at the Ritz-Carlton. At that point, he was doing a lot of Japanese stuff, right? And this was back in 2005.
Because he eventually worked for Michael Mina, I think, at one point, right?
After the Ritz, he went back to Michael Mina, where he was at Aqua with Michael. But Ron was doing this Japanese like dashi, like everything that's in vogue now, right? He was doing in 2005. We were making our own dashi with like the best bonito and shaving it to order and making, we were doing all this. We were killing spot prawns. We had a spot prawn tank in the walk-in. We were killing spot prawns to order for sashimi. We were doing these things where now it would still be relevant, and this is 2005, right? So, his food is, if the ingredient is not great, then you can't make good food, right? So he was he went to the farmer's market himself 2 to 3 times a week, so I still look to our time there and I'm like, okay, well, that's how I want to cook. Ron is not, that is like one of the guys, because he's a guy who, he cooked on the line with us. He still cooks on the line today. He's probably extremely uncomfortable in front of the camera, just like I am, but he would rather just be, working and slaving away on the line. And those are the kind of people that, cooks respect, right? He's one of the GOATs to me in San Francisco. So Ron, really, I worked with him 2 separate times, and Ron was the reason why I worked at Per Se. When I left, I was at the dining room for maybe 2.5 to close to 3 years. And, I basically told him, I was like, Chef, I want to go to New York City because, Ron had worked at Danielle. And I told him, I want to get challenged. I've always wanted to do New York City. And he said, well, why don't you go to Per Se? Because I was looking at Le Bernardin because I just love fish. And, at that point, I think Jonathan Beno was an intern at the French Laundry when Ron was there. So Ron knows Jonathan very well, JB, and literally just picked up the phone in the kitchen and called Jonathan and was like, I have somebody for you. And JB said, he's got to be here next month, So literally that's what happened. I've never sent in a resume. I just got there and that was it, So I owe a lot to Ron, to this day.
With working at Per Se, we've had a couple people on who have spent time there. It's been described as, it's militaristic, disciplined, career boosting, demanding, rewarding. What was your experience there like?
It was absolutely the hardest kitchen I've ever been in. A lot of it is the expectation that you set for yourself, but also the expectation of the people you're working with. I stepped in there and I will tell you, I worked with, at that time, I will say like that kitchen was just loaded. It was so loaded. Like everybody I worked with today either has a few Michelin stars, they probably won some James Beards. They're on, that kitchen was just loaded. I've seen people come in who were sous chefs of other 2-3 stars and just get broken. I was part of you come in and you think you're a good cook and then they just break you down. They break you down because there's a new language, right? There's a new way. Everything's different, right? And, I think, the best thing is like, when you're in the locker room, there's a set time where you can come in. You can't come in any earlier, right? And every day is a new day. You start from scratch. So you can just see all the cooks in the locker room just looking at the clock, with anxiety because you're just like, shit, like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to set up on time today, So it was like that every day. So when you're going through it, you're just like, I don't know how I can do this. But once you get comfortable, you feel invincible after. You feel like I can do anything, And I remember David Breeden, who was a fellow cook back then. Now he's a CDC of the French Laundry. David said, we police ourselves. That always stuck with me. He which makes so much sense. We call each other out as cooks, right? That's why the standard was so high. It's because the cooks cared so much. You didn't want to be the one to fuck anything up because you're letting down your team, right? So it was almost more of a mental pressure versus a physical pressure, But that kitchen, it's just obviously I'm friends with so many people who came from there. A lot of them are amazing chefs already, who I still look up to. But it was a perfect experience for me because there's no better place to learn how to cook, how to really refine and get to the next level But I don't do that sort of food now. You take all the lessons from there. You take, the care. Yeah, you just take how you felt when you were there, And I still have some anxiety when I walk into the Time Warner building. I'm just like, oh man, it's a irreplaceable experience that I had. And when I was there, I think I was 24, 25. So I was young. My station partner was Corey Chow, who went on to be the CDC per se for a while. Great, amazing cook. So it's fun, and it's an incredible alumni of people.
Did you ever think about transferring over to the French Laundry after you'd been at Per Se for a few? Because you wind up back in the Bay Area anyways.
Yeah, I did. I have one regret in my career. There was a point where, I was talking to David Breeden because we had lost our butcher. And he was asking me, he's like, would you want to be a butcher? I was thinking about it. You feel so mentally just tired, drained from that experience, right? So I just needed to step away for a bit. And I think my one regret is I've always wanted to work at Robuchon. I wanted to work for Suga, who's at Robuchon at the time, or go work in Paris, because Robuchon to me he's the best. That's who I consider just the best. And I regret leaving New York at that time because I really wanted to work at Robuchon or Le Bernardin.
You leave, you wind up going back out west, right? After Per Se?
Yes, I actually went back to Hawaii for about 6 to 7 months. And then I made my way back out to San Francisco. I applied at Michael Mina. At that point, Dominique was opening Atelier Cren. I kind of set my sight on working. Manresa was a huge one for me. That was one of the dream spots. I was able to get pretty much every job that I wanted. The one wild card was I applied to Aziza from Murad. And it was because at that point, I think they had their Mission Star for maybe 2 years, but it just looked so different, and I was so used to Japanese. I was so used to French. I didn't know how to use spices and building flavors, because there's not a lot of spices in French cuisine or Japanese, right? So, I met with him. It was crazy. It was a Tuesday, which Aziz was closed, which I didn't know. And I think he forgot about the interview for sure. And it was, the Aziz is in Richmond. It's there's not much out there, and it was a rainy day and it was pouring. And I called and I was like, oh my God, this fucking guy forgot about the interview, and he answered and he was like, oh yeah, I'll be right there. I think he was in Napa. So literally I probably waited like 35, 40 minutes and I was already irritated. And, he finally got there and we just talked. And, Aziza at that point, it wasn't the prettiest restaurant. It wasn't going to be Atelier Cren. It wasn't like Mina. It wasn't like Manresa. But me and Murad started talking. And there's just something about that experience, we just hit it off. We didn't really talk about food. We just talked about, life. That meeting ended up we were talking for about 2 to 3 hours. And I told him, I was like, listen, I never thought I would want to work here. I just did it out of just because, I think I want to take the job, Aziza at that point, it was overachieving. The restaurant in the Richmond, it wasn't a beautiful kitchen. I saw all those things as positives. I saw those things as one day I'm going to have my own restaurant. It's probably not going to look like Per Se, right? It's probably going to look more like Aziza. They're killing it. They were killing it. So I was smart to make that decision to where, I saw this as like, okay, this could be a test run as a business owner. What can we achieve in a not great kitchen, right? And to me, that's way harder than getting 1 star at Per Se, right? Everything is there. Everything is just perfect laid out, right? I didn't spend a ton of time at Aziza. I was there a year. That friendship, obviously parlayed into he's my partner now. Is that 10 years later, maybe 8 years later? So we have a long, long history. So after Aziza, Ron Siegel called and they were rebranding the Ritz-Carlton, the dining room. And he wanted me to come back for that opening, which I did. When your father calls, you go, right? And what? So there was no hesitation. So, that it was that about 2-3 year period where I was with Ron again, and then I just worked at Murad. And I thought at that time that I was kind of figuring out a style for myself, figuring out what I want to do if I open a restaurant. I was very happy after working with Ron. I was dead set on working on Manresa. That was like what David Kinch was doing was exactly what I wanted to do, and then you see Jeremy Fox, you see James Charabut, you see just like the amount of talent that was coming out of that kitchen. You're just like, okay, that's the place, What happened was I remember it was I was eating lunch and I got a call from someone in Hawaii, a friend. He said, there's this really rich guy who's doing this crazy project in Ala Moana Mall that, he wants to talk to you about it. And I was like, well, I'm not ready to come home. And then what happened that my wife at the time, she had just gotten an offer to go back home. Really great job. For the whole time, she was just following me, right? She was sacrificing for me. So I was just like, well, I'll do this, for you this time. So I called my friend back and I said, you know what? I'll take the visit. I want to meet. I want to see what it's about. And that's when the Vintage Cave came to be. I went in for a weekend. I saw the site. I saw what he wanted to do. And I was like, holy shit. This is, is this too good to be true? To this day, there's probably nothing that was ever like it, and it was a perfect opportunity for me. One, I've met all my investors there to this day. All my investors in my restaurants I met there. My CDC at Miro now, Trevor, he was my sous chef there back in the day. It was Vintage Cave was a great time. I was burnt out to the max, but I met so many great people, kind of where I started doing collaborations. And I thought the food we were doing there I was so proud of it.
Like you said, there's never been anything really like that restaurant that existed before or probably after, in Hawaii. I think it was also billed as like, for at least a little while, like one of the most expensive restaurants like in the world, maybe for a period of time. Was it weird at all? Like cooking for guests who you knew mostly weren't like locals, like weren't people from Hawaii? Like you're always cooking for wealthy, like out of towners on vacation.
That was one of the things that really weighed on me was, we were charging $295, and that was the price that was set by the owner. I didn't think I was good enough to cook a meal for that price, right? That warranted that price. But I had to do what I had to do, So I didn't skimp on what I was ordering. We were able to build up a good local following. And that's also where the owner was Japanese. That's where I got my connection into Japan, which is something that means the world to me now. I met so many great chefs, Japanese chefs. I traveled to Japan a lot during that time. That's really a lot of our following in the restaurants has been Japanese, because obviously Japanese diners are honestly, they're the best, right? They never have allergies. They eat exactly what you want to serve them, right? They don't complain. They appreciate quality. They don't care how much it costs. Like that's a perfect guest, right? No allergies. Don't complain. Pay what it should be, what should cost. First time I went to Japan, I was just like, I still remember how floored I was and how good everything is, and it's still like, to me, the place where every chef goes for inspiration, no matter what. Even if you're not cooking Japanese food, you see the dedication that these people have. It's inspiring. But, getting back to the question, it was tough. And, our friends couldn't come. My family couldn't come. I think every chef goes through the process of, okay, I cook at the highest level. Now I want to cook for everybody. I think most people go through that, where they want something more approachable. Yeah, but Vintage Cave was a hell of a time. And I still look at the pictures, the food that we did, and it was hard, and I was very demanding. A 28, 29-year-old kid trying to prove himself with a huge chip on his shoulder. I love the people I worked with there. I see a lot of them still. I think of that time really, really fondly. The people I met and the food that we cooked. It was. I poured myself into that place.
2014, I think you're, like you said, 2029. You get named a semifinalist for James Beard Award. for the very first time in your career. I think it was the Rising Star Chef of the Year. But like you kind of your career and your name kind of starts to blow up. I mean, how did you find out about the James Beard Award?
I was sleeping, honestly. I think it was it a Monday? I'm not sure what day it came out, but it was the day off. I was sleeping and I just got a bunch of text messages from friends in the mainland, from my buddies. And I was floored because it wasn't even on our radar. When you're young and dumb, all you want is awards, right? That's what you're seeking. And that one meant a lot because I was working my ass off. It felt some validation because I feel a lot of times Hawaii is neglected, just because a lot of these writers don't have the budget to come out here. So far we're not in a major food city. We're not in a major press town, but that recognition was for really. My team was only 5 people. I was cutting all the fish. I was cutting all the meat every day. It was everybody had to pull a lot of weight, right? And that's how I run all my kitchens. I don't have a brigade of people. I don't have commis, right? We were pushing. It was good validation of the work that we put in. And when we had visiting chefs, I felt good because they were impressed at what we were doing as well. So, and these are all local kids who worked for me, who never worked in a restaurant like that, never worked at a level like that. Much like Miro, they rose their game. So that was a big thing. That was probably one of my proudest moments.
Then you leave the restaurant. You decide to kind of walk away. Was it like burnt out? I mean, I think your son was born around that time too.
My son was born completely, just like my mind was just shot, just burnt out. I left at the 2-year mark. I just couldn't. I was so stressed every day, working a ton. And, when you have a newborn, and my son was colicky, I would come home to see my wife crying, and my son was sleeping, but he had just been crying 2 hours straight before that, right? And me just being at work, you kind of feel like a piece of shit. I gotta figure something out. I felt stagnant a bit. I just needed to get away, spend some time with my son, and I needed to just take a trip somewhere and just relax. Attica in Melbourne, I just loved what Ben Shuri was doing. And I sent an email and I got in and I even got the housing. And then something happened where, I couldn't go I was going to be there about 2 months. So I ended up going to Rustic Canyon to hang out with Jeremy Fox, who's a great friend of Murad. And, Jeremy's one of the most creative, great technical chefs, ever, right? So
yeah, I think his cookbook on vegetable cuisine is like the cookbook on vegetable cuisine.
Like I don't think I've tasted food so delicious, right? He just knows how to bring out flavor. It's kind of a 1-year period of, figuring out what I wanted to do. I think during that time, it's crazy. Murad was planning to open his restaurant, Murad. He asked me, he's like, come up and see the restaurant. Let's cook a little, let's taste through some food. And this was, I think, in December. And, I stayed at his house and we were just talking. He was just like, I need you to be the chef de cuisine. And I was like, what are you talking about? Because I was planning to open my own restaurant in Honolulu. I was like, no, Kate is, I think he was like 2 at that point. And he's like, I need you here. And my wife at that point was very close to Murad as well, And I looked at the scale of the restaurant and I just saw, how much they put into it. And I told her, I was like, I think I need to do this because if not, I think he's going to be fucked.
It is a really beautiful space because we ate there a couple years ago and it's a lot bigger than you think inside once you actually get in there too.
Monster, it's I think 7,000 square feet, doing beautiful food for 250, 300 covers. That's crazy, right? So there was a point where I told him, okay, I'll help you open. So literally we were at his house in Sausalito and we wrote the menu on his deck. We cooked through it and I won't say he owes me, but I would say he owes me. But, he's been great. He's been great for me. I ended up bringing about 4 or 5 cooks from Hawaii to open just because I needed that comfort, of having guys I know, guys that I could rely on. So literally, five guys came up and stayed for the first year through the opening. One of them is Jeff Hayashi, who's now the Boku's Door candidate for America. Jeff was my cook at Vintage Cave. Then he came on to Murad and stayed there for 4 years after. That was a crazy time. I think we got a Michelin star within the first 4 months there. But that was a beast of an opening. There was nothing fun about it. We were there all day, all night. To have a Michelin star, I mean, you ate there, you saw how they plate the food. Like to do that for 300 covers, it's crazy.
I think even crazier is just like his story of just he's self-taught. Like he's never worked for any other chef. Like he's always been the guy in charge, and like, he's doing Moroccan cuisine in San Francisco. Like it's such a wild story.
He has the most unbelievable palate I've ever seen. He's that guy who just you hate because, like you said, he's self-taught, right? How can a guy who's self-taught be one of the best chefs in America, right? How's that possible, right? And he's cooking from a reference point, right? A food he grew up with. But he's natural, he makes beautiful food. And, I had to work it a long time to be able to do that, But our relationship, we don't really talk about food anymore. We talk about life, He has a new son. So he understands now, I think, the sacrifice I made when my son was 2 to be away from him for the first 9 months. It was... I would go back to Hawaii, I think once a month on the days off, and I would come straight back for service. It was crazy.
So you wind up eventually deciding to open your own restaurant. Did you get to a point where you knew it was time to do your own thing, even while you're at Vintage Cave? Because some chefs, they just get tired of working for somebody else. They want to run their own thing, call all their own shots instead of just, ordering and making the menu. Or did you ever have a realization or...
That was always the goal. I think that was always the goal. That's why I busted my ass for so long, And it's like having a kid. You never feel like you're ready, but you just have to take the leap, right? If it works out, it works out. If it doesn't, then you got to dust yourself off and figure something else out, And so I opened Senia. It was long delayed, obviously, right? Like every restaurant, right? You think there's one date, yet you add on 9 months to that, and then you add on another 4 months to that, right? So, Senia there was just so much hype because one, I think, my partner, Anthony, had an incredible resume as well. It worked into our favor about the delay just because there's so much more anticipation, right? Because there wasn't a really big opening in Hawaii for years, really, and I had already, I think, done well at Vintage Cave. My name was already out there. I had a following of people already who were ready to eat my food at a lot lower price point, right? So it was attractive, I think. So yeah, just the amount of traction from day one was incredible. Got a lot of press. Got nominations again. And it was great. It was a great time. During that time, we weren't necessarily on the best of terms, because I feel like he didn't appreciate what I did during that time, and he knows that. But there comes a point where, a brother is a brother, right? We've had many of talks where, in the end, who do you want to spend your time with, right? At the restaurant, your personal life. And, I love the guy. During that time at Senia, we started talking and figure okay, well, what do we want to do? We've always wanted to do a restaurant together, always. And, our visions align. And not only that, it's just, he's someone who, no matter how much we irritate each other sometimes, it's family, it's a lot thicker than blood, we started thinking, okay, what can we do together? And during the time at Senia, I had been approached by a real estate friend, a mutual friend, and he had told me, he said, it's called Cafe Miro, which is Miro now. I is in Kaimuki, in a neighborhood that I grew up in, and my family still lives in. It was a Japanese French restaurant for 22 years. And he said he wants to retire. He wants to move that back to Japan, and he wants you to look at it. He wants you to take over. I looked at the space, and it was much different than it looks now, but it had such a good feeling. Had good bones. What's better, a Japanese chef cooking French food in a neighborhood that I grew up in, right? That's the dream. That's exactly what I want to do. So I took on Miro and decided to concentrate on this. And we kept the name Miro Kamiki just as a homage to Chef Kobayashi. This is a restaurant that I feel that I tell people I'm going to die in this restaurant because I feel like this is my legacy restaurant. This is everything that I want. It's not the prettiest kitchen, it's not the fanciest dining room, but I'm very, very happy when I come here. I'm very, very happy with what we do here. I'm very, very happy with the people I work with. So it's really come to the point where certain things are not important to you anymore, right? Obviously, family is everything, but also too, like, put in perspective, we have so many regular diners here. And we've only really been open a year and a half. We have so many people have been here 50, 60 times already in a year and a half, with a prefix menu that changes monthly. These are people coming almost every other week, and that is a true test of success. We're financially profitable. We have a huge list of regular guests, my staff has grown tremendously, and they're happy, so it's like, I've been nominated a few times 4 or 5 times for James Beard. But to me, there's a lot of people who can have amazing restaurants that don't make money, that are not sustainable, that don't have a huge regular, guest book. We've been lucky. We've been busy every night we've been open since we opened, and that's rare. It's like one of these. To me, this is like my Aziza, right? It's not perfect. It's an old building, but there's magic in here to me. I feel it. So, this is exactly what I want. This is where I want to spend the rest of my career for sure. But yeah, there's to me and Murad, we just laugh is because, he is an Aziza and I have an Aziza here. It's like the same, like kind of broken, but it works.
To wrap up on kind of Senia, which was your first restaurant, you were there for a number of years. I mean, like you said, delayed like maybe 2 years of opening, but not just like anticipated across Hawaii, but like I think it was one of the most anticipated restaurants across the US. The New York Times came and did a write-up before you guys even opened. You were partnered with Anthony, who's the owner now. He was your boss at Per se, he was a sous chef, and then his wife, I think she worked at Per se too as well, and that was kind of like how they met. But you guys kind of building out the restaurant. I mean, it's an awesome restaurant. It's weird, your kitchen is the same size as your dining room. You guys did booths instead of just tabletops. You had a tasting menu and an a la carte menu. I think the a la carte menu was kind of more you, and the tasting menu was more what Anthony was kind of focused on. Oh, before you guys decide to just go your separate ways, I mean, you're dual nominated for a James Beard Award, which is like the first time anybody's ever been like dual nominated, like 2 chefs for the same restaurant and stuff. But they had other projects in the works. You had other projects in the works. You guys kind of mutually agree, like, yeah, I'm more focused on that. They're more focused on that. But from your time at Senia with your first restaurant to Miro, was there anything that you learned that you applied to Miro, knowing like that you've already been through it before?
I wouldn't say there's anything that, nothing new that I learned. I think one thing to look back on is that, we had a good mix of destination people, diners, and locals, right? One thing is that if you don't have the locals, you're not going to be sustainable, right? And I think that's in every city, right? Unless you're like, the Noma, or which is just so influential where, you have people flying in every day. We were set to open Miro in March of 2020. I was a week and a half away from opening the doors. First 2 months were fully booked. And I had my kitchen staff was on payroll, and the world got shut down. That was the craziest mindfuck I've ever experienced. I'll never go through something more difficult than that, having to figure shit out with, not a ton of operating capital in the bank. And I was banking on just being busy from the beginning, which, we were going to be, to try to figure out how to navigate all that, I think I aged about 10 years, during that. I think obviously everybody did, I'm not saying it was just me, but for the people who were opening restaurants in March of 2020, I salute you. Oh my God. I'm so fortunate at the staff, and I'm so fortunate that our guests keep supporting us, because holy shit, it's just, I never want to go through that again. It's just so much, never know, you just, I like to pay my investors back. And we did that at Senia so quickly, if not, I can't sleep at night, because these people believe in us, so, that was very hard for me, that was very, very hard for me. But, we're in a very good place now. I have great landlords here. So there's nothing new I learned. It's just, well, I guess if you don't have the local for a long time, we didn't have tourism here, right? So our restaurant was, you have to get filled with locals, So and this is a very local neighborhood. So, we don't even have the Japanese clientele back yet. And we're already at capacity. So it's going to be rocking even more, when they come back. But yeah, it's been a crazy 2 years for everybody, 2 years,
You guys started selling like bento boxes, like during the 3 months that you guys were, forced to be closed before you kind of reopened? Because you guys eventually opened for like dine-in in June or something, right?
Late June, yeah. I didn't want the first thing that people saw from the restaurant to be a deconstructed version of a fancy dish, right? Because we all know, like, you can't plate a 5-course prefix menu to go. It just doesn't work. So you just do something that's completely opposite, right? Pretty crazy, when people don't think of my name and think $12 bento, right? But I think that was a juxtaposition. That's what really, that's what I realized. It's like, shit, man, this is a food that really resonates with everybody, right? It's not a fancy dish. It's not a foie gras torchon or whatever. It's a musubi with 5 different types of meat, a couple of vegetables, and for $12, right? So I think that allowed us to have a lot more eyes on us, eyes that, would never have been looking at Miro, I can't say that those people come in. I really don't know. But, it spawned Papa Kurtz, obviously, and just me wanting to be approachable. When you came in, you said a year ago?
May 2021.
How much was the menu? Was it 75?
I don't remember. We did like every supplemental thing that you guys offered.
But if you don't do an add-on, right, you get 5 courses. We opened with a $65 menu, 5 courses for $65. I don't know where you can find that now. You can get a steak for $68, but you're not getting a side with it, right? So the original concept of Miro, he had a prefix menu, and it was, I think, 4 to 5 courses. You build your own for $65. So I wanted to stay true to what he was doing. Our lease allows us to, have some room on the food costs, be a little higher. So, I think right now our menu is at 82, but, we're using Washugu flank steak. We're using, Ora King. I can't not buy nice stuff, I think that's at, Vintage Cave. I just bought whatever I wanted to. And, we still buy super nice caviar. We buy really nice stuff, and I don't ever want to creep into the place where we become not approachable. I don't want to be the celebration restaurant. I want to be the restaurant where the bar is packed with people who come every week. And so far, that's what it's been. It's been people who, like, I know these people now, I've seen them almost every week for past 2 years, So, I'll eat a little bit. I'd rather the profit be a little bit lower, but we not be unattainable. Like, people, when they come from San Francisco or New York, they're shocked that they can get these 5 courses for $75. Shocked, And to me, that's a great thing because, it's like we're still doing the same techniques. We're still cooking great ingredients, but we don't need to charge $150 or $125, That means a lot to me.
With the menu, how hard is it not to just put like 90% of it to be seafood? Because you're in Hawaii, you have all this great seafood. Is that a challenge in itself to like, yeah, we could do just all seafood if we wanted to, but like we really shouldn't?
100%. The most famous dishes that people think of me as are vegetable dishes. It's cabbage, right? At Vintage Cave, I had a cabbage dish that was one of the top dishes for Food and Wine that year. When we opened Senia, we had the same cabbage, but a different preparation that, really became the signature dish, and that dish, people begged me for it at Miro, and we did it for 1 month, but it's like, I saw it every day for 4 years. I don't want to see it anymore. There's a caviar dish that I did the second or third service at Vintage Cave. It's basically a piece of smoked brioche with caviar, aged maple, creme fraiche, and some grated Marcona almond. And that is a dish that it just follows me. People ask for it constantly. And, when we opened Miro, we did not offer it, but everyone asked for it. You get to the point where it's like all you want to do is make people happy, right? That's what it's about. Now we offer it and we sell, like my purveyor is just shocked at how much caviar we sell. It's shocking because the price of the caviar brioche is almost the price of our menu, for 2 bites, right? But it's just so expensive ingredient, right? But it's just something that, every night we're shocked at how much like people still want that dish. People still ask for that dish. Even when we do collaborations, people are still asking for the dish, even though it's not even on the menu. Seafood, 100%. We always have trouble coming up with the menu for the meat course. We always have trouble. Seafood and vegetable courses comes easy to us. I told my manager that at some point, I would love to morph this into a seafood and vegetable only. It's just people expect, the red meat at the end. And I don't eat a lot of red meat, I always order fish when I go out, or I go get sushi. So I can say that at some point, I would love to go to that direction. I would love to.
You mentioned collaborations. I mean, you guys have done a decent amount since you've been open. You did one with the Maison team. Their restaurants in Paris currently closed. They're bouncing around. I got the chance to eat some of their cuisine in San Francisco, but Lamar in Miami, Contra from New York, Comey. What's been kind of the driving force, the driving idea behind doing all those events?
It started at the cave. I got to just pick all these people who I admired, right? It didn't matter. I just said, come cook with us, cook whatever you want. Those are some of my closest friends now, right? James came, Moran came, Viet Pham. There so many amazing people. Jeremiah Langhorne, Belinda, Ron Mendoza. We had such a stacked lineup, For me, selfishly, I saw what they could do firsthand, right? But also the staff was just blown away, And these are kids who have never eaten at these people's restaurants, but are working with these people firsthand. Now these people are friendly with these chefs, right? How beneficial is that, right? So that's something, as soon as we opened Miro, I was like, we got to do collabs. I don't care how much it costs to people. I mean, we've flown Sota and Marcin from Paris. Think about how expensive it is to fly 2 people out from Paris to stay for a week, right? I don't really care. It's something, when am I going to work with Sota again, right? When is my staff going to be able to work with an amazing chef from Paris? When is my staff going to be able to call James Shibut a friend? 2-star, one of the best chefs in the country, right? We just had Diego yesterday and the day before. Diego was amazing, got to know his family, tangible than my cooks, my front house, to see how these people operate, how they think of their restaurant. My cooks are getting a first-hand education. They don't have to go anywhere. They can stay here, just go to work. So all they do is come to work, and they get to work. They get to see how ceviche is made. They get to try a Peruvian potato. It's just like, that's cool. As a cook, I worked with Ron Siegel through a collaboration with Roy. So I saw the value in that, and it's something that we do every month. And it's very difficult because it's a lot of work, but it's worth it to me.
When we were there, you had escargot on the menu. Obviously, you guys rotate your menu, like you said, like every month or so. How often with the snail like tongs, how often was snail shells like flying across the tables?
Oh my God. I don't think people in Hawaii have ever seen those, right? Normally people don't serve it in the shell. That's me eating at Tuamek, Ludo, great restaurant. It's just so cool, the presentation, right? And you can just stuff it with more butter, I feel. So yeah, there's definitely been a learning curve, but that's something that never comes off the menu. The people always expect, and they always add on escargot. And to me, it's like the snail is not the best part. It's just the butter, the foamy butter, right, with the bread. That's really what you're ordering it for. So
I don't know. The snails are pretty delicious.
they're poached in like a corbouillon too. So, but it's like they're good because of the butter.
You guys are open with Miro for a little bit, and you open Papa Kurt's that November, which is a noodle shop kind of, but you guys also serve burgers. Like, how did that idea, was that strictly born out of doing the bento boxes and stuff during the pandemic, or?
Kind of. I was having lunch with a friend, and that kind of food. We do local style burgers. We do Simon. We do wonton min. That food is very strictly a very Hawaii thing. That combination. Simon is not ramen. It's not like
It's shrimp, right? It's like a shrimp.
shrimp dashi based. Yeah. It's basically it's a dying kind of food here. There's a few mom and pops who still do it, who are amazing. And that's really the food I love to eat. And, it's named after Kurt Hirabara, who used to grow the cabbage for me. We use Hirabara Farms. He was a legendary farmer. He was a farmer where he picks who he wants to sell to. He doesn't just sell to, if you ask him, he doesn't sell to you because it's, their farm is very small. When I started Vintage Cave, our general manager knew him from the Big Island. And the first trip I took was out to Hirabara Farm years and years ago. And I basically begged him. I said, can you please sell to me? He used to sell to like Mavro, only the best people. He's like, why should I sell to you, And we had a talk on the farm, and it was like a Murad thing. We talked the whole day, and we just hit it off. He was absolutely a father figure to me, absolutely one of my closest confidants. I used to talk to him every Monday for an hour or two, and we just talk about life. And I really, really missed him. He was a huge, huge part of my life. He was there for my first job at Vintage Cave, and we talked every week. I love him so much. I miss him. He was close to a lot of chefs, but
you had like a bond that went past food.
100%. Yeah. Just he always told me that I was his favorite. I was talking to him on a Monday. By Thursday, he was in a coma, a rare, stomach cancer. I was just devastated. To this day, it's just still devastated. I'm a very private person. I don't share my feelings with anybody. And he's like the only person who I could share anything with. Always gave me advice. Always told me to never take myself too seriously, that you're just a cook. You're just a father. And the best thing about you is that you're a father. No one gives a shit about that you're a cook. I miss him so much. Papa Kurt's is for him. And it's something that I'll always have. No matter, as long as I cook, I'll always have Papa Kurt's. It means way more than a business. It's not a business. I don't care how much money it makes. It doesn't matter. I was so close to him, and every day I still wish I could talk to him. It's just devastating. I went up to his house when he was in a coma with another one of my closest friends, Gooch, just to see him, lifeless. It's just devastating. And, we left his house, and 2 hours later, he passed away. I think he was just waiting for us. But I really wish I still had him around. Just devastating. I just didn't smoke. He didn't drink. He was so healthy, but it just doesn't make any sense. But Papa Kurt's, it's food for everybody. It's food that I'm super proud of. Again, like I said, it's going to be around for as long as I'm alive because it's for him. Kurt never cared about how successful I was. He just made sure that, I was being a good father. He didn't care. I always try not to talk about him because I think about it all the time. I think about it every week and every Monday, especially. I think about, we would have been talking, and it's just.
Because you would have gone up to the farm and everything on those days.
He's on the Big Island. We just talk by phone. We always do my ordering on Monday, and I would just because we get deliveries on Tuesday, and it's great because his brother still delivers our stuff here, and I know they're so happy that there's a Papa Kurtz, I even got a tattoo of his face, so I love the family, it's a great family. Auntie Pam, she moved to Hilo, but it's just there's people who come into your life and they just have an immediate impact, and a very lasting impact, and it's just we still get most of our stuff from here, Bar Farm, but it's just I try not to get the cabbage for them anymore, just because it's just so synonymous with our relationship. When I went up to the farm to beg him, I asked him grow stuff specially for me, and he was like, "Why should I do that?" They have like an acre and a half plot, which is very very small, and their main thing is lettuce, which makes them the money, right? It got to the point where I had my own little plot, where he would do stuff just for me, and I was the only one, and so it's hard to see. It just brings back a lot of memories when we get the cabbage or when we get the carrot. It's very emotional. It's very personal for me. I don't think a lot of people understand the relationship that we had.
A few months after Papa Kurtz, I think you wind up taking over the How Tree in Lanai after the hotel kind of rebranded. The Kaimana Beach Hotel, they want to go under new ownership, and you kind of get involved with the restaurant there and the menu. What kind of was the appeal with that opportunity when it came up for you?
So, me and Murad, we partnered together and felt that it was a good opportunity. An extremely iconic location. It's Kaimana Beach is a beach that all locals go to. We growing up, we always barbecue at Kaimana Beach. And it's 10 minutes from my house. It was a good opportunity. We designed the menu, trained, and we turned our attention to the projects that we own. Because at that point it's like traveling to Hawaii so often was hard. Because his restaurants feel it, right, or Miro feels it when there's no attention, right? So we felt that let's concentrate on places that we're clearly invested in. So we opened a restaurant in Maui together called Like Coco, and that has been a new challenge because the restaurant is bigger than all my restaurants combined, which is difficult only because it's like everyone's going through staffing, right? But trying to staff a big restaurant is harder than trying to staff a small restaurant, right? So it's been a challenge, and obviously tourism up and down. I think we're finally trying to find our footing now because it took us a year to get our liquor license there, which is crazy.
Was that just because everybody was shut down because of COVID, so they weren't processing?
It's a Maui thing.
Island time?
Whatever it is brutal. So literally, we got our liquor license in January. What is it right now? April. We got it like 3 months ago only. The restaurant's been open like about a year and a half. Isn't that crazy?
So would people have to go get drinks at like the hotel bar or something? Or
they set up a satellite bar. Don't get me started, but it was literally like a satellite bar with like 6 selections of wine, no cocktails, and beer. That's it. So literally it took us over a year to get it. Crazy process. When I say crazy process, it's a process that will never make sense to me.
If that restaurant wasn't in a hotel, chances are it wouldn't make it.
Let me tell you, we're an independent restaurant in a hotel, which means we have to pay all the bill. Like it's a restaurant, it's not like a hotel funded thing.
I guess my point being, like, if you open like a standalone restaurant and told the public, like, hey, we're not going to have any sort of alcohol for a year, and like you're trying to pay all your bills and everything, like that's like a death blow in itself for most restaurants. And luckily, like, because you're in the hotel, like you maybe get enough foot traffic to compensate for the loss to at least make it the year that you guys had to before the license comes through.
So, but it was also too, it was during the pandemic, right? So they were telling people not to travel to Hawaii, right? So, it's been a hell of a year, with people not coming, and then all of a sudden so many people coming, and you're trying to find staff. Notoriously, the outer island is a lot harder with staffing. I don't know why. Maybe because more people are transient, the workers in the hospitality. I'm not sure, but it's been exponentially harder to find people in Maui.
We started working on our trip out there last year, like months in advance. I mean, I was watching like the local Hawaii news on YouTube, like figuring out like, all right, they said that they were going to open like inter island travel. Like, so that means we should be okay if we just go to one island. Like, what all do, are they going to do they were talking about doing like a vaccine passport thing. And it's like, you had to get a COVID test. It's like, all right, well, I got to find the link for the COVID test. And it actually was not hard. I mean, it was, hey, these are our preferred providers, like go through them, upload it. The biggest challenge was like our flight getting delayed on the way there and having to scramble to like connect through a different airport to get to San Francisco within this time frame. So like our COVID test didn't expire. That was kind of the biggest challenge. But with kind of Hawaii being such a tourist, heavy economy, are restaurants in hotels or restaurants like partnered with hotels viewed differently than they are here in the States? Where in the States, I feel like if you open a restaurant in a hotel and it's not a super high-end hotel, I think people still kind of look down on it a little, even though they probably shouldn't.
I think it's, originally, we didn't design the restaurant. This was slated for another chef, actually from the mainland. So, we really walked into this very late. So we didn't design it, we didn't spec it, but we saw an opportunity because of the pandemic, they wanted to go in a different direction. So this is where we came in. And it was difficult in the beginning because, I was having to take a test every time I went there, right? And I was going there a lot. And then there was, just all the, there at one point, just getting a rental car was like $500 a day because there was no cars, right? They shipped up all the cars during the pandemic. So it was it's been crazy. They just lifted the mask mandate here. So it feels like it's getting normal now. So I'm hoping that, we better clear skies ahead.
In a recent interview, you talked about people should really probably work like 1 or 2 years in a kitchen. And we're kind of talking about staffing too as well. You were saying like it takes at least 1 year, maybe 2 for somebody to get comfortable in a kitchen. With all kind of the staffing challenges that are out there, do you think there's going to be kind of a shift on the restaurant owner side where you can't do that anymore just because everybody's like trying to grab as much talent as they can?
I think you hit it right. I think everything has changed, right? The expectation, a cook staying for 2 to 3 years is gone. I think you're lucky if you get the year now, and that's what we've seen. I think even the past 5 years, everyone, they feel like they figured it out, and, really, I myself couldn't figure anything out within, 8 months or a year, right? But to me, if you're not having a direct impact on the restaurant, as in, a sous chef creating dishes or, streamlining a process, then I don't think you're ready, to leave. If you haven't worked all the stations, before, like you would get blocked on working the next station because the guy won't leave. I remember getting a job in the dining room at the Ritz-Carlton with Ron Siegel. There was a waiting list, before. Like, it was not one of these things where you come in and you get it. Like, there was a waiting list and you needed to start from the bottom. And you were on a station for like 8 months to a year sometimes, right? Because the guy above you is not leaving. So think about how much it's changed now, right? Like, now, like, every month, people are whizzing through stations and then they're leaving after 8 months, right? But my God, I think at the Ritz-Carlton, I was on Garmager for probably the first year just because no one moved, and there's only so many stations. So, I did that for a year, and, you go through many menu cycles, you figure out so many different techniques. That's valuable, So, yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's different. It's different now. I mean, I'll be happy if I get a year, I'll be happy if I get 8 months, maybe.
With the ingredients for your restaurants that you guys source, how much are you guys able to get locally? Since a lot of the farms in Hawaii are smaller farms, like you mentioned. So is it always kind of a challenge figuring out what you can get locally versus what you might have to like import from California or even possibly Japan for certain ingredients?
It's hard because we're a prefix restaurant and we run the same menu monthly, right? So, we're sometimes limited on what ingredients we pick to see if they can supply us for the whole month, right? So, we did a carrot dish last month and they come from Miramar Farms. If we go through a spell where we're even busier than expected, then that affects the quantity, right? It affects the next month. So it definitely plays into it. It's hard. A lot of these farms don't. There's a lack of land space here, right? So Hirabara is only like an acre and a half, I believe. So that's not big for a farm. That's small. It's tiny, right? So there's only so much they can produce. There's a great fish, and it's farmed. It's Kona Kampachi. And last month we were running it, and we had to switch to hamachi for a bit because even though it's farmed and it's from here, they didn't have enough supply, for the demand. So it definitely gets tricky. But Trevor, our chef de cuisine, comes from that farmers market mindset. So he always goes out, and we substitute sometimes. I mean, I'm not super rigid on it has to be this, it has to be that. It just has to taste good. I think that's more what we're after.
Roy Yamaguchi, Alan Wong, George Mavro, those are kind of the three chefs that your generation looked up to in Hawaii. Kind of everybody looked towards them for a path to follow, kind of paving the way. Aside from yourself, who else kind of in your class is kind of helping pave the way for the next generation?
I think Sheldon represents Tin Roof now, food for the people, but it's delicious, right? And that is a representation of food here, multicultural. I think Andrew Lay, being a lady, there's no other restaurant like it. We came up cooking together for sure. He's a Magro alum. I always enjoy what he does traditionally and non-traditionally. Ed Kenny, he's my neighbor at Miro. See him almost every day. He kind of spearheaded bringing back that whole mindset of use what's here. Those are three people who, at the top of my head, who I look through, I look to with what they're doing, because also too they're all business owners, right? They're independent restaurant owners, which is very difficult. Me and Ed, literally we're 20 feet from each other. I just have to cross the street, right? I remember he told me a few years ago, he's like, don't open so many restaurants. He told me that. And the young me was like, no, I'm going to do it, but it's like, he's right. It's quality over quantity. You have to really believe, you should really believe in each restaurant that you open, that it should feel good, and he's right. And that's kind of the mindset going forward. I'm only going to open something that I completely 100% believe in, because over the last 3-4 years, we've been offered a lot of things, but I opened a burger place. I never thought I would open a burger place, but we had it for staff meal a few days ago. It's good. It's I want to eat it more often, but obviously it's I don't want to look like how I look like now, so I can't eat too many burgers.
So I asked this to Taylor Ponte, who came on the podcast last year. In your mind, what makes someone Hawaiian? Because you're fourth generation Japanese, but you're born and raised in Hawaii. To me, that makes you a Hawaiian. But to some people, it's all about heritage and ethnicity. Do you see it that way, or?
That is a tough question. I was talking to Diego yesterday. He's third generation, I believe, born in Peru, but of Japanese descent, right? So it's the same thing. It's my parents don't speak any Japanese, right? They consider themselves just from Hawaii, right? Local. We call it local. I consider myself from Hawaii local. Does that mean Hawaiian? Not necessarily, but I consider myself a local. Born and raised here, been here. My grandparents were born here, Maui. I'm pretty far removed from Japan, right? So I would say I have pretty deep roots here then, right? So I wouldn't say I'm Hawaiian, but I think I live life and with respect to other cultures. Having a sense of place, and I think we definitely have a sense of hospitality that's different here. Whenever a chef comes in, I make sure that they have the best time. Just that they're cared for. I just dropped Diego off at the airport. They went to Maui for a couple of days, and I made sure I grabbed him sandwich speeds for the plane, for his kid, for his wife. It's just like things like that. That's what we do as locals. We just make sure that people are overfed, right? Never hungry. That's our sense of hospitality here.
Your first love was baseball. Grew up playing it. Who's your team? Who do you follow?
Ooh, it's funny because growing up in Hawaii, TBS was a huge thing here. It's like so the Braves were always on Turner Broadcast. So I grew up loving the Braves, like Sid Green, David Justice, Greg Maddux. But my dad, and my brother are diehard Yankees fans. So like my dad loves Mickey Mantle. So I follow the Yankees, and obviously I've lived in New York. I love baseball, but I also love the Giants. I lived in San Francisco for so long. I've been to more Giants games than anything. I love Buster Posey. But I would say, those two teams, but also I think what Shohei Ohtani is doing right now is pretty crazy. He doesn't look like a Japanese guy, right? He's so tall and built, and he's just like the next generation. He just can do everything, So I've never seen him play in person, but I definitely want to.
San Francisco casts a pretty wide shadow on the West Coast food scene. Do you think Hawaii can eventually be viewed as a peer to it, or kind of on the same level? Since you guys have some advantages with having a year-round grow scene and stuff like that, or is it just kind of too small, too far removed? Not that, you're trying to supplant San Francisco as the West Coast premier food scene or anything like that, but
I would say, maybe people will give me shit for this, but on the high end, I don't think we're ever going to supplant San Francisco, right? They have so many high-end restaurants. But if you want to go, punch for punch for just delicious food, I think we're already there, I think where in San Francisco can you find a really good musubi? Not that many places. Where can you find it here? Everywhere. Where can you find a great poke bowl? A lot of places here. Where can you find great Hawaiian food? Where can you find, Vietnamese, what Andrew's doing? I think we're just as good as San Francisco in every other aspect, to be honest with you. And this is somebody who I live and breathe San Francisco. I lived there for off and on for 7 years. I thought I was gonna live there forever, but it's a different city now, much different than when I first moved there. On the high end, I don't think people are trying to do that kind of food here, but on the just where would I want to eat delicious food, I think we're already there. I think there's a lot of delicious food here. It's not necessarily the fanciest place, but I eat well here, so.
You've kind of become this almost like restaurant restoration kind of rehab guy. Like you're reviving these concepts that were kind of headed towards closing with, Miro Cafe and Papa Kurt's to an extent too as well. And then you take over, the hotel restaurant that somebody dropped out of. Is that something that you kind of feel like a responsibility to do outside of just it being good business or making business sense?
I don't look at it towards revitalizing something. I take it on, Miro is one of one, right? It's a legacy that I really was interested in keeping going. One, because it's a neighborhood I grew up in. It's a neighborhood, it's on 9th Avenue. My parents still live on 9th Avenue, but on the other side. So literally, as a kid, this space used to be broken up into two spots. It used to be a restaurant and a bakery. It was called 9th Avenue Bakery. My mom used to take me there every day for breakfast before school to grab a sandwich and a pastry. So to operate a restaurant in a place where I used to go as a kid, that's pretty cool, and that's why, I love spending time here, and Papa Kurt's is something, it's more not a revitalization. It's keeping on something that I hope will never die. It's that the local food culture. But hotel restaurant, it's a very singular opportunity. But these ones are, I kept the name Miro because I respected what he did for 22 years, and I want that to last hopefully for another 22 years, and then I can retire.
Pineapple on pizza. Are you for it or are you against it?
I'm not into it. I don't shy away from anything, but I don't. You know why? Because I like pineapple when it's cold. When it's hot, it's so weird.
How has the restaurant and food scene in Hawaii changed since you've been involved in it, and kind of where do you see it headed?
It's changed because there's a much more. The talk is much more about sustainability, especially the pandemic. The people were scared that the boats weren't coming in anymore. We still get so much stuff shipped in here. That's the talk I had, with my manager about, can we get to the point where we're not doing any meat, where we're just doing seafood and vegetables. That's where I would like to head. What do I see? I see every year, I think our food scene gets better. It gets more diverse. So I can only imagine in 10 years, hopefully I still have my restaurants, but I'll speak to Miro. The longer we've been open, the better we're getting. So this restaurant won't hit its mark, until another few years where I feel, okay, we figured some things out, we're dialing it in, and, we're better. So maybe the next time you eat here, we won't have any meat, I would love to head that way.
What's kind of next for you professionally? You got the few restaurants. I think there's a rumor out there that maybe something happens in Tokyo because you go there a lot.
Tokyo, Japan as a whole, has my heart, and that's me going to Tokyo when I was an adult, with my parents really not caring to go, but the way I feel when I'm there, it's someplace that I would love to retire to. I love to live there. And, I've been very fortunate to go to some of the best places to eat there. And it's been my dream to open something there, to cook in that culture amongst, the amazing chefs. That is, I'll say, it's on the bucket list, but I think it could happen, maybe soon. Whether it be in Kyoto or I'm not sure between Kyoto and Tokyo, but it's something that I have my eye on, because that would be, I would love to live there half the year if I could, and cook there and do something very small, and as well as our clientele. There's so many great Japanese guests, and a lot of them have encouraged me to open there, and it's my happy place, That's it's like you can go to a convenience store, you can go to Lawson's and eat a great meal. I would say great meal for under like $5, and it's like get an iced coffee, a sandwich, fried chicken, or a musubi, or a pastry, like at a convenience store, and it's just as good as a brick and mortar restaurant. It's like it's just like. Whenever I go to Japan, I just eat too much, and I don't drink. I don't really drink, so it's just like eating. It's crazy.
This question comes from Dan Varga, the chef and butcher here in Columbus. He owns the Hungarian Butcher. He's a previous guest on the podcast. Left behind a question for you. What are you doing to help train and pass down the culinary heritage and culinary culture that you have to the next generation of chefs?
That's a great question. A perfect example is Trevor, who's my CDC, was with me when I had my first job at Vintage Grave, right? And I remember he came in as not a lot of experience, definitely not high-end experience. And I remember to this day, me teaching him how to do his first torchon, right? Cleaning the lobes, rolling it, poaching it, tying it, hanging it, waiting a couple of weeks and then cutting it open, right? To see. And I still remember, I still have the picture, and the amount of pride I had to see that he's now running my restaurant as a CDC and working with the menu with me and seeing how far. So now Trevor has a kid, right? When I was there, I had my kid. Now he has his kid. So it's like, it feels like it's all come full circle, Trevor is he's going to open a restaurant with his wife, and I can only imagine how good it's going to be, And to me, like you said, no longer do you chase awards, you chase a legacy. And that's what means the most to me is that, I have people like Trevor. I have people like Jeff Hayashi, who's going to do the Boku's Door. I mean, Jeff's going to do the Boku's Door. He's representing the United States, right? And he came in as a very inexperienced cook at Vintage Cave years ago with no confidence. And now he's going to represent the United States in the biggest cooking competition in the world, right? Like, that's my legacy. That's part of my legacy, And, like, what's better than that, And, obviously you can't be as hard on this generation, I mean, I was called a piece of shit a lot when I was coming up cooking, but I don't think you can do that anymore. But, I still, I see Trevor passing on things that I pass on to him. And it's funny because, during service, I'm asking for something and I'm not very eloquent, right? We're cooks. We don't know how to communicate. But he just understands exactly what I'm trying to convey, even though I'm not conveying it correctly, if that makes sense, So it's just funny. He's just been around. He knows what I want, And, he's going to be leaving soon to Portland. And, I have to train who's our sous chef to be able to take over now. That's my job, is to make sure that Steven, who comes from New York, who's our sous chef now, is going to be able to confidently run this place day to day, And but that's the best thing. It's about evolution. The restaurant's going to evolve every 2 years, So it's a good thing.
What question do you want to leave behind for the next guest? It can be anything.
What restaurant inspires you the most in culture, in cuisine, in everything, the whole package?
This question comes from one of our listeners. They wanted to know, how do you keep cooking in your kitchens fun? I think what they mean by this is kind of, how do you not let it become too routine, too day in, day out, same thing over and over again?
Which is hard, right? That's part of the grind. I worked in kitchens. Every kitchen I worked at, it was very quiet, right? No one talked. Definitely no music. As an owner, do I want to come into work and be part of that environment where, everything there's so much tension, right? Like, no one wants that, because I don't want to come into that, right? So we have a lot of fun here. That's why I love coming here, because my cooks are so young that I learned so many new things, and it has nothing to do about culinary. It's like terms or phrases that they use now, or last night we were talking about these dating apps that they're on. It's just, it's fun. It's funny. And one of my cooks last night turned 21, and it's like, God, I remember when I was that age, But we listen to music, we sing. There's a lot of banter, because all my cooks, they went to culinary school together, like in the same class. So they've been together for a while. They've been here since the beginning. So you can imagine there's a lot of shit talking, right? They make fun of each other a lot. It's just fun. Me and Trevor, we're constantly laughing at these kids, because, it's a new generation, and they keep me young, and they keep me updated on what's going on, I guess. I mean, a lot of the times they talk about golf or MMA. It's like, whenever there's a UFC fight, these kids are like itching to look at their phone to see who won. It's crazy.
So the last set of questions here, we ask these to everybody who comes on the podcast. Nice compare and contrast across all the episodes. Who would you say is the biggest influence on your cooking career thus far?
2 people, Ron Siegel and my Auntie Betty, who she's passed away, but she was always cooking, at her family gatherings. I always used to watch her, help her in the kitchen. So she was a big one, Auntie Betty.
What's one kitchen item that's not a knife that you can't live without?
God, I think a Vitamix gets used and abused, right, in every kitchen. So I think, or people are gonna slam me for saying this, but like having a rationale, it's like amazing, right? I love a rationale, a combi oven. I love it.
Restaurant you'd recommend that isn't your own. The scenario I give is, person got stuck at the airport, stuck overnight, reach out to you. You guys are closed. Hey, where should we go eat?
There's a restaurant open for breakfast and lunch called Ethel's. That is like everyday food, amazing. It's like you eat there, but you're not doing much after. You're just sit on the couch and watch TV. I also think I eat Japanese food a lot. Izakayas. There's so many great izakayas here. One called Gaku that I love. I go there pretty often.
Bucket list travel destination, bucket list restaurant. So place you haven't been to that you want to visit, and then place you haven't eaten at, but you want to eat at someday.
I would say I've never been to Paris. Robuchon to me is God. I love Robuchon. But I think Echebari in Spain, I can only imagine. I can just tell how good it is, It just looks so simple, but I think that's definitely. But, I've been going to Japan so much over the past 4 or 5 years that it's hard for me not to go back to Japan every time.
Craziest thing you've seen happen in a restaurant while you're working?
I think the craziest thing is probably just vomit at the table. Oh, no, actually, I have a good one. There's a candle. We had candles, and it was like on like a kind of a service station, and there's a booth right next to it. One of the diners' hair caught on fire, and she had no idea. But her boyfriend next to her was like, holy shit, and trying to tap it out. And, she finally got it out, but she was such a good sport about it. She just carried on. Her hair didn't catch on fire. I think she had a few cocktails for sure. I've never seen something light so fast.
Maybe it was extensions and she wasn't worried. She could get it swapped out.
It really wasn't natural. I mean, the way it lit, it was like instant. Yeah.
Food or drink guilty pleasure. Is there anything that is terrible for you, but you can't help yourself? Fast food, candy, anything like that?
I try not to do it because, it's like when chefs get out of work, it's the only thing that's open, right? But I love French fries and I love ice cream and I love them together. So like the McDonald's $1 ice cream cone with fries, like for that price, there's not much more pleasurable things together. I love, but like in our kitchen, we eat so much gummy candy, like sour gummy candy, like every day. So bad.
Favorite Instagram account you follow?
Ooh, it's hard. That's impossible.
It doesn't even have to be a restaurant either. I mean, but one that you just, when you see it, you always kind of go like, oh yeah, like you enjoy it.
It's probably cliche, but I really love following Renee from Noma. I've known a lot of people who work there. It just looks like he's having fun. It looks like I know how tedious and what they do, but one of my servers who's from Sweden just went to Noma for lunch over the holidays, and the sense of hospitality there, he said, is just next level. That comes from the top, I'm sure, So that only if your leader believes in that, then your staff will be like that. So I like to see what they're up to, even though my food is nowhere near what they do. So it's so different. You know what? I have one more. I like Mark Wiens. Have you ever seen him? I think he's Migrationology. He's like a eater who eats all over the planet, but he's super famous. But just like him eating food, like his face is just like he's having like an orgasm. Everything he eats, it's like the funniest thing. It's just like it could be like a French fry, and it's like the best thing he's ever done in his life. I like to watch him. His page is pretty funny.
Favorite dish, thing you ever cooked, created? Like looking back on your career, you can kind of point to this dish as almost like your aha moment where you knew you could be a professional chef.
I think the cabbage dish at Vintage Cave, I was really happy with. It was charred cone cabbage. I basically took dehydrated kombu. I did a dice of that, dill, and I covered the charred cabbage with that. I served it with miso creme fraiche. I took Korean dried anchovies and made a dashi with a little ginger. So it's charred cabbage with the kombu, dill, miso creme fraiche, and anchovy dashi. I still think it's probably one of the best things I've ever made. And it was garnished with a cabbage chip.
I'm an Anthony Bourdain fan. Not everybody is. If you were, is there a moment, episode, scene that stands out to you about him? If you weren't, is there another culinary personality, whether it's Emerald or Bobby Flay or just anybody who was on TV that you kind of gravitated towards?
Huge Bourdain fan. I remember the first time he went to the French Laundry. It was with Eric Repair. It was a, legendary episode. But, looking, I still watch his old, like Parts Unknown, his newer stuff. He's such a great storyteller, and at the end, it wasn't even about food. It was about social issues, economic issues, just injustice. But he was such a great storyteller. And I think that's why he was so, I think people revered him because he stretched much beyond, the beginning episodes was just about food, right? How good food was. And at the end, it was just about where the food came from, why the food's like that. It was a story. So I watch his newer stuff because I think he was such a great storyteller.
Where can people find you? Social media, websites, reservations, plug all that stuff.
I just changed my Instagram handle back to my original one, which I started, which was it's CK Cuisine 21. So that's my Instagram. Miro, Kaimuki, Papa Kurtz, White Cocoa Maui. I don't run those accounts, so don't DM them or anything. I just CK Cuisine 21. I answer a lot of people, their messages.
You guys are open at Miro, Tuesday through Saturday?
Wednesday through Sunday. Papa Kurtz is also Wednesday through Sunday. White Cocoa is every day. Hopefully there'll be Japan, maybe something, but we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, I can't recommend it enough. Anybody finds themselves headed to Honolulu, the food's awesome. I mean, Honolulu has a really cool food scene. It's a little bit harder to find. You can find places on Maui, but some of the other islands, it's a little bit more spread out. So you kind of have to plan accordingly. But Honolulu is pretty dense, so you can kind of line stuff up a little bit easier. But Miro is awesome experience. So hopefully we'll be back in a year or so, hopefully, give or take. I don't know. We'll see. Like I said, awesome restaurant. Awesome to see you guys having success still after COVID and everything too. And just different dinners that you guys are doing. And like I said, I can't recommend it enough. And I really appreciate you coming on. And like I said, hopefully we see you soon.
Right on. Thanks for having me, brother.
A big thanks again to Chef Chris Kajioka for coming on the podcast, taking some time out of one of his days off to come on and chat about his career and his different restaurants and what it means to be a chef in Hawaii and be a Hawaiian chef and working with Hawaiian ingredients and all that stuff. I think it's a really fascinating conversation. So it was really awesome to have him on. If you've never been to Hawaii, I mean, obviously a lot of people aspire to get there at some point. Honolulu has a great restaurant scene. I couldn't recommend Miro Kaimuki enough. We had a phenomenal meal there. His old restaurant, Senia, has a great tasting menu option there too. And they also do an a la carte thing. And there's a bunch of different great sushi spots too as well across Honolulu. There are great restaurants on Maui too. You're kind of on the different ends of the island. But there's a lot of different interesting stuff going on. You know, we had Chef Taylor Ponte on last year. He does kind of a in-home catering, kind of private catering operation. So that's an option too. There's a few chefs that do that around the islands and stuff like that. So if you've never been to Honolulu, I would definitely recommend getting there. It's definitely the most approachable, kind of easiest to get to of the islands. You can stay right in the city and kind of walk to most things or take the bus or stuff like that. So again, you can follow him on Instagram at Chef Chris Kajioka, at Miro Kaimuki, at Papa Kurtz, and at waikoko.maui. All those accounts on Instagram. Make sure to follow us on Instagram too as well at Spoon Mob. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook at Spoon Mob One. Check out the website, spoonmob.com. Follow, subscribe to the podcast, wherever you get your podcast from. And that's it for this week. Appreciate everybody listening. Feel free to write in any questions, comments, emails, either spoonmob@yahoo.com or go to the website and use the contact portal. Appreciate those that have been writing in, but appreciate everybody listening. And we got more great episodes on the way. So until next Thursday, we'll talk to you guys then.